Okay, next step. I've wet dry sanded this with soapy water with 320. So this is just the first set. This is kind of a guide coat to see where you're at. What's nice again with the hot air gun is that just dry it off and then use a hot air gun and warm everything up again, and that gets the moisture out of the Bondo. That dries it up even in the little nooks and crannies where the water hides. But as you can see, my guide coat, you can see when the parts are pressed, they don't get pressed smooth. There's always little lumps and things. These are the mounting holes. I filled them in for now because that would have caused a problem when I was trying to mold it. But you can see where there's bends, you know, the metal's just stressed when being slammed in a press like that. And so the primer's going to fill all that. You can see where I've sanded it. One thing I didn't mention is the reason I leave it high and rough is because, like I said, if you try to smooth sand the Bondo to a finish, it's going to cause a low spot because the Bondo sands faster than the metal. But better than that is the primer sands faster than the Bondo. So I use my hand because I've done this for years and years and years. Sanding block would be better for the guys just starting out. But just use light pressure and you'll start peeling off, and see what happens is the Bondo comes down. You can see where it's really high because it's smooth. And then it starts filling the scratches. So you're not tearing out the Bondo, you're actually filling it up from the top and then feathering everything in. And you can see right here where the metal started to poke through. I barely even touched the metal. You can see there's just a little bit of a low spot there, a little bit of a low spot there. So this is ready. I have to do a little bit of touch up, but I can do that afterwards with some special lacquer putty. But everything is pre-smoothed. It's down to 320 again, so now this is just ready for another good coat of primer. Your first coat of primer usually ends up most of it being gone, because like I said, that's just a coat to see exactly where the high spots and low spots are as far as that goes. So with doing body work, you end up like the Bondo, most of it gets taken off and most of the primer gets taken off also, because you don't want a thick paint underneath. You want to keep your paint as thin as possible. And so that's that. I'll do the next part and tape it. Okay guys, making some progress here. I got lazy ass Gumby to get off his butt, and now he's back on his butt. But I had him clean off. I used just warm water, and off the separating agent goes, and like I said, it just melts in warm water, so it's awesome. I've got the last coats of primer on. I put a few heavy coats and dried them, force dried them with the heat gun to 200 degrees. Now I was talking about there's basically two kinds of glazing putty or lacquer putty, whatever you want to call it. The cheaper stuff, the red stuff, is basically just super thick lacquer paint, and it really didn't like to fill in pinholes or anything like that, and or small dents. It just kind of wants to pull out. It doesn't stick well. This stuff, it's just Bondo brand. It's called Professional Glazing and Spot Putty, and it actually comes with the same kind of hardener the Bondo does. And this stuff is awesome because it's like cream Bondo. It's kind of like in the middle. So when you mix it, use very little of this stuff. You won't barely use any of it, even hardly anything of a tube, because it doesn't take a whole lot. And just mix it well, and just, if you got pinholes or whatever, you can just rub it hard. It'll fill the pinholes. I had a divot here where I didn't get the Bondo all the way high enough, and I just filled that in. It dries super quick. It's tough, it's durable, and it sands really easy. So it's a lot easier than Bondo, and just a little bit harder than primer. So I went ahead and filled in that divot, and that's just awesome stuff. Once you try it, you'll never go back to the other stuff. And I also, I'm kind of combining these two things here. I also had to work on this because this is an actual oil tank. I just need a cover, so where I had to have all the slots and the holes and everything, I had to fill them up. So what I did, it's a two-part process because you have to finish the inside also, but so I just used like 3 layers of tape to give it some meat, just to kind of come around wherever the divots were, and filled those in with Bondo, and then just took my cheese grater while it's still soft and just kind of flattened it out. What I'm going to do is I can just take, I'm going to have to reinforce it with fiberglass, so I'll probably do that when I do the other cover, but I just kind of flatten it out. I don't want too much Bondo over on the fiberglass. It's not a huge deal, but I just don't like it that way. And then a lot of guys sand it or whatever before you put another layer on. I don't. You can just take acetone, wear gloves obviously, and just rub it around, and that just softens up the fiberglass enough to where it'll stick really nice, and it'll also stick to the Bondo nice. So then you just put a couple layers over that, and then once we get that done, I can start working on the inside. I'm going to clean it up a little bit, and then I'm going to use the professional glazing putty because that stuff's so easy to use. Like I said, it sands faster than the Bondo, but this is pretty much set up, so I can just pop the tape off here real quick, and you can see I've got basically just fill the holes. Like I said, there's some little spots here, and this was kind of funky there, so I didn't even bother with that. I'm just going to fill that from the inside, and I'll get this sanded down kind of close to where this other stuff is, and then I'll just go ahead and use the lacquer putty and glazing putty and finish that out. Just be careful here to match that, and then I've got to do the edges with my vibro cutter, not a big deal, and then that'll be ready to spray down and mold. I got to clean this up a little bit. That's a cutout for the frame tube. That's just kind of nasty. I couldn't get in there last night. So, but just that's kind of how you build a mold that has holes in it. Like I said, I'm going to reinforce it with fiberglass on the back and then sand and match it in the front. That way I'll be able to take a mold off of it, or actually make a part off of it. So that's what it is so far. So next is sanding on this side cover, getting it ready for molding. So that's that section. Okay, I left off, I just put on the second coat of primer, and so I put a nice heavy coat on it. Again, since the enamel base it dries slow, I use the heat gun, heat it up a couple of times to about 200 degrees easily, so that really sets the paint. So I did a 320 sand, and so you can see it's hard to tell, but it's smooth as a baby's bottom. Well, at least 320 grit bottom. But and I did a little fix here, so as you can see, I kind of broke through a little bit here, but that tells me everything's basically, all the low spots are filled. You just sand very carefully with big strokes. Again, I use wet and dry and soapy water with this type of a primary enamel. So basically this is ready for molding. If I was going to be painting this, I would go ahead and shoot one more light to medium coat, and then just carefully sand it so I would not have any, I'd had primer all over the metal. As far as this goes, that's not a big deal, but this is going to be for molding, so I'm not going to do that step. It's not necessary because it's going to be coated and coated for making a mold out of. I filled these holes. I didn't prep them out really great. That's where the original mounts, they had hook mounts on the older 500s, so I had to fill those in because I'm using them on a newer 500, and so they use little nipples or whatever. So I took an old side cover and I taped off the back so there weren't any undercuts, because I needed to make 4 of these so I can mount them on the new covers. And so I just made a 2-part Bondo copy. They're quick and easy, and did that, and then shaped it a little bit. This is just a test fit because I don't know exactly how they're going to fit on the cover. But I made it 2-part so there were no undercuts, because you have an undercut here. So, and then I cleaned it up a little bit. But Bondo's great for quick molding. I made the mold the piece out of just JB weld to see how it's going to look. So these will be JB welded in. Once I get the finished design, I think I'm going to put a little brass piece in there for a little bit more strength. But this stuff is super cool, super tough. So I'm going to have to make 4 of these. Like I said, not the final design. And then I'll JB weld them on the inside, and then these will be pop-on type covers. So got that done. One last thing: when you're molding parts, you've got to watch out for undercuts. You have to have a draft angle so the part will actually come off and it's not locked in. Everything on this was good except for the holes. I filled those, and I'll be breaking that out because this isn't my cover. I'm just being loaned it from a good friend of mine. But we would have had undercuts here at the bottom where they tack welded the mount on. So basically all I did to get rid of the undercuts, I just filled in with clay and shaped it so there weren't holes here, and there wasn't any undercut back here to actually lock the mold on from pulling off. And I'm going to be using that hole, so I just filled it up, pushed it in, so there's a little divot. There'll be a divot in the mold, so I'll know exactly where the hole goes. And a little split at the bottom, I just went ahead and filled that up, so that'll look like a one-piece unit. So that's about it for that piece. I made some more progress on the right side cover. Last I had shown you, I'd where the filler was, and the breather vent tube, and the oil level, that I had to leave holes for those, and so I filled those all in, smoothed everything out. This with the Bondo, when you do something like this, it's on a negative or female part, it's really hard to work and see exactly what's going on. So what I just filled it with Bondo with tape behind it, and then I ground everything low, and then again I just used the so much easier to sand, this professional grade 2-part glazing putty, and it only took a couple of coats, but got that all smoothed in, so I really won't know what it looks like until it's done, but I can clean up the part later on that. And this is where the mount was. So this is all done. It doesn't have to be super smooth. If it's not a production item, so once it's primered and everything, it'll look just fine. And so that's pretty much done too, except I have to reinforce the back with fiberglass. I'm going to shoot a coat of primer on just to clean it up a little bit on the inside. Then that'll be ready for molding. I cut all the edges with my vibro cutters. Boy, those come in handy for everything, and they're cheap. And so this is once I get the back fiberglass, they'll be ready to coat, and I'm going to have a part here soon. So that's that for that section. Like I said, been making some decent progress, so hope you guys are enjoying what I'm doing.